from our sermon series, Heroes of Faith, as it is our family camp Sunday. And we are taking a detour to come over here to talk about this, but Judges chapter 2, which really kind of goes in line with the rest of the Old Testament that we've been covering up to this point. We're skipping a few sections ahead, but we will go back to our Heroes of Faith study next week. But as we are going through our sermon series, and as we're going through this time with our family camp, and as we are spending time together, we are really focusing and emphasizing the importance of not just faith, but passing faith to the next generation. And so we are blending our family camp into our service this morning because we want to show the importance of investing in the next generation. Because the fact of the matter is that we have been charged, rather commanded, to invest in them. Help them understand and to see the work of God, and then invite them at a young age into the work. There have been many churches and many people who have said, well, we would love for you to serve in our church, but you have to be 18 or older to serve. Let me tell you, some of the best servants in the church are 18 and younger. Kids who are invested in the work of the Lord and in the church as they do this. But Israel, as we're going to see, is the perfect example of setting the next generation up for success, but also setting the next generation up for failure. Because when they discipled their family, when they disciple and talk about the Lord, you see that work in their life. But when they fail, you see them fail hard. And it's hard for us at times to see past ourselves. It's hard for us to see the outcome of the future. But if you read the Old Testament, you will see the outcome of a failure to disciple your family. The entire book of Judges is full of Israel failing and falling into sin and disobedience. That's why we had Katie this morning read to you Joshua 24 when he commands them and says, serve the gods of your fathers if you want, or serve the Lord, but pick one or the other. And when they answer, we will serve the Lord, what is the next thing Joshua says? If you're going to serve him because he is a jealous God. And if you turn your back on him, just like he did good for you, he will come after you. And if you want to see God going after the heart of Israel, read the book of Judges. Because it is a vicious cycle of them falling into sin, God saving them and calling to them, the judges bringing them back. There's a time period where they are following the Lord, but then guess what? It's the same cycle over and over and over again. But honestly, the same is true for us. We fall into the same sin cycle in our life, where we have sin in our life, and God brings it out of us, and he calls it out of us, and he points it to us, and we repent of that sin, and we try to move on, and then all of a sudden, a couple years later, we find ourselves in the same rotation. But the entire book of Judges is full of those falling into sin and disobeying them. And really, it starts with our passage this morning in Judges 2. You see, Joshua is about to die. We're in the next section of Joshua 24, we see his death. And in the first section of what we're going to read this morning, we see the passing of Joshua. And really, as we talked about last week in our sermon series, I love the fact that last words of these patriarchs, of these figures in Israel's history, are so important. Because the last thing Joshua really commands them is, pick who you're going to serve. Who are you going to serve? When I'm gone from here, when the elders that are here, when we're gone, Israel, who are you really going to serve? And so Joshua dies. And this leads us to Judges chapter 2, starting with verse 6. It says this: when Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his own inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that city, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountains of Gash. And all the generation also were gathered to their fathers. And this is the saddest section of this whole book. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. Verse 10 is one of the most heartbreaking verses in the entire Old Testament because it shows how easy it is for a generation to not know God. You see, in biblical context and even in our context today, a generation is roughly 30 years. It could be shorter than that. It could be a little longer than that, but 30 years is roughly a generation. The next generation has to hear the work of the Lord in our lives, just like Joshua. Because verse 7 tells us that Joshua and the elders had seen all the great work that the Lord had done. And when it says that they had seen and that they knew the work of the Lord, that means they not only knew it, but they proclaimed it. They told of it. They shared about it. They saw all the times that the Lord delivered them from danger and from struggle. They saw all the times that God saved them from destruction. That generation specifically remembered what God did to the previous generation before them, that they could not enter the promised land because of their sin. And because of that, Moses, who had led them for all these years, could not even enter the promised land. Joshua had seen the Lord do amazing things, and he proclaimed it to Israel. They saw the Lord working in the giant moments, but they also saw the Lord working in the quiet moments as well. And so in our passage this morning, we see three areas, three steps really, that lead to a generation forgetting God. The first one is the generation before them, though, they knew God. Verses 6 through 7. When Joshua dismissed the people, the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua and the elders knew God. They had seen his work in their lives and in how they got to where they were. See, Joshua was about to die, and so he sent all the tribes of Israel, he sent them to inherit the land that they were promised. He told them to go and get your land. And because of Joshua's faithfulness to God, the elders and the people during this time, they served the Lord. Because they knew God, they were faithful to God. They knew God because they had experienced him. They knew God because their fathers had experienced him. They were faithful to fulfill Deuteronomy 6, as Dad read for us this morning. They were faithful to tell the work of the Lord. But it's one thing to verbally share your faith with your kids or your grandkids or your next generation. It's another to live out what you speak as well. You see, Joshua didn't just talk a big game. He didn't just talk about being faithful to the Lord. He showed it in everything that he did. And because he lived it out, the people were able to follow suit. The elders were able to follow suit. What you say is important. The stories you share are important. The moments you speak on are important. But what's even more important is how you live your life. You see, our kids, our grandkids, the next generation, they pick up on patterns more than they pick up on principles. I have proof of this already, because Becky is only 9 months old. And there's one thing about her daddy that she enjoys. And those of you that don't know, a majority of you do know, but I am a massive pro wrestling fan. I love professional wrestling. In fact, if you look at the text thread between me and Mr. Joe, 99% of it is probably talking about professional wrestling. I watch it every Monday. I watch it most Fridays. Anytime there's a pay-per-view, I have it on. Which means, guess who else is watching it with me? Becky. And she hears a certain entrance music. She'll hear a certain song come on, and her head will pop up before my head will pop up, and she's got a smile on her face. They remember patterns from a young age. They see the things that you do. And here's the most important part. Your kids see what you do in private more than anyone else. And what you do in private, they will do in public in the next generation. So how you live your life in the shadows, when nobody else is looking, when nobody is watching, when you're not on stage, when you're not in the church worshiping, your kids will see that and they remember that. And for many people, they speak one way in church and they live a completely different way in home. And it pulls their kids in so many different directions. So if we say you should live your life one way, you need to live that life at home as much as you do in public. What you think is a simple, small sin now can turn into a big sin for your family and the generations to come. So does this mean that your kids shouldn't see you struggle? Does this mean that your kids shouldn't see you go through things? Absolutely not. They need to see you go through those struggles. They need to see you go through those moments. That way they can see that, and when they go through it, they remember what mom and dad did during that time. But we have to share about the Lord. One of the things that I've really been emphasizing and picked up on is intentional discipleship. And what does intentional discipleship really mean? I think for a home, it looks a little different than when you're investing in someone else's life outside of the home. Because at home, when you just do things without thinking about it, you're intentionally discipling your kids. When you talk a certain way without even thinking about it, that gets instilled into them. So why is it then that we have to focus so much on talking about God in our homes? It should be second nature for us to speak about what God has done. And it's not even just reading the Word of God. You can take moments from your own life when God has worked, provided, done things that nobody else could do, and you share those moments with them. And they will remember that. See, we know God. We have a relationship with God. We have the ability to speak with Him. We have the ability to share Him. But we have to be willing to actually open our mouth and do so. Here's our principle that I hope you pick up. Knowing God personally produces faithful obedience and a life worth following. Joshua had a life worth following. The elders that followed with Joshua had a life worth following. They were faithful men of God. Abraham had a life worth following. Moses, even though he messed up at times, still had a life worth following. Let me ask you this. If you personally take a look at your life, is your life really worth following? Are you really faithful to God? Are you really following after God? Or are you just playing the part of a Christian? In church, you play this part, but at home, you're a completely different person. They knew who God was. The second thing that we see is they left a gap, or there was a gap, in verses 8 through 9. 8 through 9, it talks about Joshua and his death and his passing at 110 years old. And what's really interesting in verse in the earlier parts of the verses, when they talk about the elders who also outlived Joshua, that they were faithful to God, which means Joshua set up the people behind him to follow through with being faithful. So that you had Joshua and you had the elders and you had these moments where they were leading faithfully for the Lord. But there's always a gap between generations. There's always a spot between generations, and that little gap can do more damage than anything else. We talked about it last night in our family camp. We talked about it last Sunday, passing the baton. In the gap, when you pass the baton, if you do not pass it smoothly, you're setting the next generation up for failure. You see, Joshua lived 110 years of a faithful life to God. He walked with the Lord. He worked for the Lord, and he was willing to do whatever the Lord asked of him. He set the example of how to be a faithful leader in uncertain times. He showed the people what faithfulness to God really looked like. But also the elders were faithful in following Joshua while he followed God. The people had the examples to follow. The people had the thing in front of them. But again, there was a gap that was left. You see, Joshua didn't pick a successor. He didn't pick someone to take his place. He sent them back to Israel, to the land that was inherited, to the land that was promised to them, which then really sets up everything that happens in the book of Judges and why we had to have these judges come in to be a part. But it is the responsibility of the next generation. Joshua set them up. He didn't have to pick a successor because he lived out faithfully in front of them. And here's the thing that we mentioned, but we fail to realize sometimes, is I think a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on us to make the next generation succeed. All we can do is all we can do. And what I mean by that is if you pour everything into the next generation, if you pour your heart and your soul into them, they still have to choose to follow. You see, God gave us a free will. If we didn't have a free will, we'd be no better than the angels. We would just be following blindly. But God gave us a free will to choose whether to follow or whether to not follow. And so Joshua did everything he could. The elders did everything they could to set the next generation up. I mean, I think Joshua 24 is a perfect example. I think the people there were genuine when they said, we want to serve the Lord. We want to follow him. The next generation has to be willing to do that as well. You see, the older generation can set the example. They can pour their souls and lives into the generation behind them. They can do everything in their power to set the future foundation and the future generations up for spiritual success. But it's the responsibility of the next generation to pick up the mantle and to follow the example set before them. And the sad truth is, the more generations that come, the more they tend to fall away from God. And it is always the fault of the previous generation. Now, we can look through history and see there are some previous generations that did not set them up for success. But from all we can tell, Joshua and the elders were faithful to not just experience the work of the Lord, but also to tell and to share. You see, you may share your faith. You may train your children to walk in the way of the Lord. You may follow Deuteronomy 6 every single day of your life. And your kids can still choose to not follow God. Does that mean that you failed? No. It means that they are picking what they will follow and what they will do. They have to make faith their own. They cannot have your faith. They cannot take on mom and dad's faith. They have to realize that they have a role, a responsibility in the work as well. Because if they don't, when mom and dad are gone, what are they going to do? Do whatever they want. Fall into whatever sin that they had in their life. My faith cannot be my dad's faith. My faith cannot be my mom's faith. Now, their faith influenced my life and it set the example for me, but I have to take my own faith. I have to have it for myself. You can't control their faith, but you can influence it and you can shape it. You can show them, teach them, and help them. Again, this is why we are pushing and talking about mentoring and discipleship, because God didn't intend for us to walk through life alone. But he also didn't intend for us to walk through life spiritually alone as well. We should have at least one person, if not more, pouring into our lives, teaching us, discipling us, showing us, so that when the older generation is gone, we can teach the next the works of the Lord. And honestly, I think this is where a lot of people get lost or confused. They say, well, I don't know how my kids walked away from the faith. We took them to church every Sunday. They were in every VBS that we had. They went to church camp. They did all of this. Maybe you took them to church on Sunday, but how did you live your life Monday through Saturday? You have to be consistent. You have to live out your faith like it actually matters to you, because if you don't, they will notice. Dr. Ron Hunter says in his book, Backwards Discipleship, when spiritual disciplines are absent from daily family rhythms, we raise children who see faith as optional and disconnected from real life. Faith cannot be an option in our home. Does that mean we force it on our kids? No. But we live it out in such a way that they see it as second nature in their life. You have to live your life like it actually wants to please the Lord. If it isn't enough to come to church on Sunday, it isn't enough to come to small group on Tuesday nights, it isn't enough to just attend church functions. They help and they are important. But if you are only doing it for the appearances and nothing more, you have missed what it means to reach and teach the next generation. You have to invest daily in your faith. You have to invest daily in the faith of your kids. We have taken this seriously in our home. Every single night, bedtime is our favorite time. We love bedtime, and not just because that means she's going to sleep and the playing and the loud noise goes away, but we love bedtime because every night before bed, we sing the little Pat Your Bible song that they sing in nursery. Whatever family rhythm or whatever lesson they're learning in the nursery, we walk through it as simple as we can because she's 9 months old. But our favorite part is at the end of every night, we kiss the Bible goodnight. And Becky will lick the Bible goodnight because she doesn't know how to kiss it. And now because she's teething, she bites the Bible at night a little bit. But it's just simple things. It's simple things that build the faith of your kids. We're not asking you to take extra time out of the day. We don't have extra time out of our day. But as Deuteronomy 6 says, as you are going in the car rides, at family dinner time, turn off the TV. Sit at an actual dinner table and talk about what God has done in your life. We have to make family discipleship a priority. Because if we leave a gap, we are leaving the next generation to fail. We are leaving the next generation to figure it out on their own. And as our sermon bumper, I know it was quiet, but as our sermon bumper said, they're being discipled by someone. And whoever wants the next generation will get them. We have to be willing to disciple them no matter what. Pour into their life. Spend the time with them. We cannot leave a gap for them. Because if we leave a gap, we get to verse 10 where we see, I forgot the main principle. I pulled a dad. Here we go. Main principle. Here's the main principle for the second point. Every generation must intentionally disciple the next. But each person must ultimately choose to make faith their own. So you can pour into the next generation. We are supposed to pour into the next generation. But each person ultimately has to pick whether they are actually going to follow or not. The third thing we see is they knew God, there was a gap, but finally they forgot God in verse 10. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. How quickly it all can change. We go from one generation seeing the work of the Lord and being faithful to a generation who did not know the Lord or his work. See, when we fail to disciple the next generation, they fail to see the Lord and his work. They had forgotten, or really what that word forgotten is, they didn't believe. They had unbelief in it. And after hearing the stories of God's provision, they failed to understand. They failed to remember it. See, it's easy for us to pass things down that we care about. It's easy for us to pass things down that we are passionate about. For example, my brother, my dad, my papa, my nephews, even my sister have a passion for baseball. From an early age, baseball was a massive part of my life. I remember being little at Granny and Papa's house and listening to Papa and my dad and my brother talk about Cincinnati Reds baseball and how much my grandfather despised Dusty Baker and how much he despised Drew Stubbs and all of these other things, and just listening to him talk about baseball. I remember the stories he would tell about his playing days or about his brother who was a professional baseball player. I remember the pitching advice when I began pitching and the mechanics he taught me. I remember it all. And that's over a simple game. That's over a hobby. I want my children and my grandkids to say, I remember when he would talk about God and all the work that he had done in his life. I want them to remember the stories of my life, of God providing, protecting, and even punishing me for my mistakes and bringing me back to him. Because if they see how passionate we are about God, even if they walk away, they will remember what was intentionally passed down to them. The result of forgetting God isn't because Joshua and the elders didn't do enough, but it's because of sin. It's because of the sin of man. It's because of our flesh, which means we are in a generation that forgets God, which I honestly believe is the generation that we are describing right now and living in, which is why it is critical that we share the work of the Lord, that we tell of his goodness, that we tell of the work of God. Just to fall again and go through the same cycle again and again and again that they have done is not what we should be letting them do. You see, a revival can break out right now. We could have a revival break out in this country, and we could see lives come into Christ, and we could see lives change and true transformation happening. But I can promise you this, there will be another generation that comes, and we are right in the same cycle again. That's why you have to share. That's why when God looks at the world and he looks at us, he should find faithful men and women, and despite all of the chaos and all of the confusion and all of the destruction that sin has caused in the world, we should be faithful enough to God because he has been faithful enough to us. You have to share. You have to do everything you can do to allow the Holy Spirit to work in the lives of people around us. Which means you have to get out, and you have to find people, and you have to talk to the next generation. You have to talk to young people. You have to walk with them. You have to share with them. You have to tell them of what God has done in your life so that they can see. Here's our main principle. When God's works are not continually remembered and passed down, future generations drift from him. I remember during the pandemic, honestly, the pandemic was one of my favorite times. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's the only time I can remember where my entire family was together. All of us. Tim and Amanda's family, Anna and Levi. Katie was even down here with us. We weren't married yet, but she got trapped in Tennessee because she didn't want to live in New York during that time. You can figure out why. But every single night, we would have a massive dinner together. And you know what we did every single time? We talked. We shared stories. In fact, if you ask my nephews what their favorite time during the pandemic was, it wasn't that school was gone or that all this other stuff was happening. They said that when we talked around the table, when we just shared stories that we have shared 1,000 times. I know a majority of Dad's stories by heart now. But we smile and we laugh every single time. We should be doing the same thing with the works of the Lord. Around the dinner table, just talk about what God has done in your life. Talk about the things he protected you from. Talk about the things that were difficult. The moments where you wish you did something different. But when we don't talk about him, the next generation forgets about him. Here's our main principle for our sermon. The church and the family must faithfully model, teach, and disciple the next generation so they will know the Lord and continue his work after us. I want to have a faith that long outlasts my life. I want to have a faith that my grandkids talk about, that my great-grandkids talk about. I want to set the example for the generations to come. But that means I have to do my part now. I can't just sit and wait. I can't just sit on the sidelines and think, well, God doesn't have to use me right now. He can use me when I'm older, or, He can use me then, or He can use me whenever. I don't have time right now. If we don't start now investing in the next generation, honestly, if you wait until someone is 18 to start, you are way past time. You have to invest in the next generation. That's why I love our kids' ministry. I love that we have a teaching nursery. That it's not just a time where kids are in the back and it's babysitting hour. No, they are learning about God. In fact, if you hear them pounding against the wall back there, it's because their posters of what they're learning are there, and they're hitting them, talking about them as they're running around the room. I love that we have a teaching nursery. I love that we have a teaching children's church. I love that our kids are our most engaged singers on Sunday morning. But let me tell you something. It's not enough to just come to church for an hour. If you are not doing this at home, you are failing your kids. If you are not discipling them at home, you are failing them. And church, let me be real honest with you. If you are personally not investing in them, you are failing the next generation. If you are not personally meeting these kids where they're at, you are failing them. You are not walking beside them. You are not helping them. As we talked about last night, the church is a family, not a collection of families. It's not several little families put together. We are one family by God, which means we walk together. We walk side by side. So this morning, let me ask you, is your life worth following? Are you faithful to God that your kids and your grandkids and everyone around you know that you are faithful to God? Maybe right now you're in the gap where you're sort of faithful to God but not really faithful to God. You don't really know where to go. Maybe this morning you've just forgotten about Him. Or maybe this morning you have kids that have forgotten about Him.